Just fix it in post.
Oh yeah, that's great, but we'll never use it.
There's no budget, and it was due like yesterday.
There's been a slight change in direction.
I promise it's just one last revision.
Welcome to Just Fix It in Post, industry insights straight from the source. I'm your host, Sean Rice, and welcome. Today's special guest is a social media wizard out of Saatchi&Saatchi in Dallas. He's the brains behind Toyota USA's social presence, crafting content that grabs attention across TikTok, Instagram, and beyond. Before taking the wheel at Saatchi, he fine-tuned his PR and social skills at Fleishman-Hillard. And now he's here to share his journey from intern to content master. Let's give it up for Sam Vander. Dude, I am so excited to have you on. We've been talking with various different people throughout the industry. We haven't had the agency side yet, so it's kind of really cool to kind of get that. I feel like there's a lot of change going on, and I really want to hear your story because I've had the privilege of watching you. I feel like it's been a few years now, right? Go through the motions of this, and then all the huge milestones you've been able to hit, which have been really cool. So tell me all about your history. How you got into this, where you started, the whole thing.
Hey, that intro too, man. Nothing hypes you up like a good podcast intro. I just showed it to my wife. I was like, he just made me sound really, really good. So thank you.
You got it, man. You're worth it.
Yeah, no, I hit 5 years at Saatchi&Saatchi actually a few weeks ago. So yeah, it's been a journey. Thank you. But yeah, no, I know our paths have crossed here and there through work. Thanks to my predecessor Max, who was great. But yeah, how did I find my way to Saatchi&Saatchi? I'm from Illinois originally, west suburbs of Chicago. Went to Iowa State, graduated from their journalism school there with a degree in public relations and leadership studies. So very much focusing on all the aspects that come with sort of the new world of what public relations sort of means to the industry. The blending of those things like advertising and old school journalism, for better or for worse, but it's been an interesting ride. And during my time there, I interned at a full service public relations firm called Fleishman-Hillard. And then moved down to Dallas, Texas, where I am now. Was there for, I think, all in all, almost 4 years or so. I ended up being there full time, became, assistant account executive, senior account executive, working on, a full service PR firm. It's a litany of things, right? Started out working and really supporting, right? Learning from incredible mentors and people that were working on things like automotive, which I'm doing now, but brands like General Motors and working with their CEO Mary Barr and things like that. So very much a fly on the wall at those points, but really getting to watch some incredible people, some brilliant people, not only shape what public relations and really what social media can look like for corporations, but I had a mix of the traditional PR side. I don't particularly miss pitching stories or writing releases and things like that. That's not for me. Quickly moved over to other brands, working on things like Android. I was lucky enough to just be, again, a supporting role and a fly on the wall during things like the Android Oreo release, which was super fun to watch, back when they nicknamed the OSs after desserts. Yeah, and then worked on B2B companies like SAP Ariba. Had a lot of fun doing those, and again, worked with some really great people that taught me a lot. And then Fleishman-Hillard is actually where I met my now wife. So, moving to Texas had some nice twists and turns for me. But then, yeah, found myself at Saatchi 5 years ago now and came right over just with social media experience to help join their, growing social media team supporting Toyota USA. So all things Toyota Motor North America. And again, joined a small but mighty and growing team within Saatchi&Saatchi's agency. Saatchi being the agency of record, for those that don't know, for Toyota Motor North America. They handle a lot. They do a lot of stuff for Toyota in the North America space. So social is one small puzzle piece within that. But I'm sure, as we'll get into here, social media is rapidly growing and I think a big industry that's going to continue to be around. So yeah, it's been really fun. To your point of talking to agency side, it's interesting being within a larger advertising agency, right? It's this massive, well-known, great reputation advertising agency that does what most people think of as traditional advertising. And then there's our team that kind of does, a little bit different things, and we're there to support. But it's been really fun to kind of see and help reinvent some ways in which we can all work. Hopefully a long story sort of short.
With social media, how did you get into that aspect of your work? As I noticed you went to school for journalism, How did that kind of evolve for you from, once you left school to where you are now?
I often am like, I joke, I'm like, I think if I ever wrote an autobiography, it would be called Falling Up a Hill. Sometimes you just find yourself in these experiences and working with these teams, and they just ask you if you'd like to learn more or support something. And that's really sort of what wound up happening at Fleishman-Hillard, right? We had certain clients where they had both sides of that business, right? The traditional side, maybe more event and experiential, but they also had social support, whether that was corporate social, so like, branching out and putting, CEOs on LinkedIn, but also the brand pages. And so at that point, I think Fleishman-Hillard was a great place to be since it was full service. You had an opportunity, or I did as an intern, to say yes to any and everything. You got the full breadth of what can an agency support for a business look like in every different avenue, and just kind of get a feel for what you like. And so I was just very fortunate enough to, work with great people that offered me that opportunity. I think that's one of my biggest things, is just say yes. And so I showed a real interest in the creative side of that. It's just kind of kept up from there. I always had an interest in photography during college. It sort of just kind of grew and grew. When I moved to Texas, it grew and grew, and I got, more, not professional experiences, but I got to see and work with people that did that in that space. And so I think that really pushed the creative side, the creative interest for me. That was the side of social media, I think, that intrigued me the most. I mean, being the age that I am, I was already on social media, right? But it's very different being someone who just uses social media to actually implementing it in a business aspect. The biggest thing was just saying yes and really branching out and trying those things. That starts with writing copy, right? Writing social copy, kind of getting a feel for a brand's voice, getting a feel for the different platforms. It's not always easy to translate the way that you might speak to a brand on social, but more and more we see that, happening. Brands like Netflix are great about that. They're very in tune with the zeitgeist and the way people speak now, but that wasn't always the case. I'm not really giving you a very clear answer. I think it's saying yes to the opportunities, that are put in front of you sometimes, right? If it's a small company or just a friend that needs help with some things and you want a creative project, or they need help kind of writing copy for something and they don't really know, that's sort of where it started for me, was kind of taking the initial background I had in both journalistic writing and creative writing and trying to, blend those two things, to continue to push sort of what, my understanding was, what my voice could be, but also, again, like blending with a brand. And so that just became more fun to me. And I think also the nature of social media moving fast and the way that my personality is, I like some of those things, right? I don't always love a project that has a really long horizon timeline. Social media affords you not only the room to fail and fail quickly and then move on, but I think those are some of the things that really drew me to social. And so it just kind of grew and grew from there. Being able to work under great people and learn from them, and then saying yes to opportunities, and then eventually, a job opens up like the one that I came here for, which was just a specialist on the social team. And then getting a great mentor like Max Franklin, who, afforded me even more opportunities to learn behind the camera, write more copy, obviously pitch in. We're a full team effort on social strategy, and all of those things just start to snowball. And so it's just always staying curious. That's what I love about this job. Every day is different.
What's your particular role? What is your title actually?
Social media manager now. Yes. I have a small team that I now manage.
With what you do, what do you oversee exactly? And then what channels are you actually distributing to?
So Toyota, we activate on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We had Twitter for the longest time. There was obviously the tumultuous stories with Twitter and X and Elon Musk. And, the brand took a break from that. And I just don't, I can't speak to it, but we haven't really seen the need to go back. So we really just activate Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And TikTok has been the fastest grower for us. I don't think that would be a surprise to anyone to hear. TikTok's just user growth obviously is skyrocketing, but as an automotive brand, we're one of the fastest growing on that platform. And we launched our TikTok 2 years ago. So it's been really fun. But to your first question, me as a social media manager, I feel like titles and agencies they can be often arbitrary and kind of funny. Particularly on my team, we're a small team of 6. So, we're kind of figuring it out as we go sometimes. But I do oversee essentially the creative execution for Toyota USA channels from the Saatchi content. That's, I think, an important caveat. Toyota is really proud of the T Squared agency initiative that they've had for years now, which is their multicultural agencies. And so there are other agencies that do feed into Toyota USA Social. And I know you've done great work with Burrell, right? And across all of us. So we are, us being the agency of record and just a little bit bigger, we do, I think, support more of the social content. But yes, my job within our social team at Saatchi is to oversee the creative, look and feel, that execution there. And my team helps execute that, day in and day out.
What about products? Are you overseeing all the vehicles that come out of Toyota? Are you then also into battery life solutions? Which aspects of Toyota do you fall under your umbrella?
I wouldn't say I own them. I would say we support them. I don't know if I'm allowed to take that big of a swing, but yes, we support everything. I mean, the social side is very much we have to support the full life cycle of vehicles, right? Obviously, we know that we've learned over the years, people want to talk about the new, right? We just had the new, 4Runner come out. And so when we talk about that on the channels, people love that. But there is still, the Corolla, right? The Corolla is one of the best selling sedans in North America. There needs to be that love there. And even though it hasn't had a model refresh in a while, there is, yes, of course, we have to support the full portfolio. And then to your other question, batteries and things like that, our team does support a client on the PR social side, they call it at Toyota, that does really showcase a lot of those corporate initiatives, a lot of the manufacturing. Toyota's manufacturing efforts are massive in the United States, with plants, in a lot of different states from Texas to Alabama to Kentucky to Indiana. And so, yes, all of those initiatives are supported in one way or another by our team. So it's not just, hey, new vehicle came out or, some lifestyle assets of that vehicle. It really does. We do show support for those initiatives like the corporate social responsibility, some of those really exciting news, that come out around manufacturing efforts, things like that. So yes, and batteries, battery life cycle and any innovation in that side, we try to support that as well. So yeah, it is a full scale spectrum of the things that we can talk about. And so that's a blessing and a curse at times, right? It's how do you sort of balance those topics? How do you understand what people want to learn more about? What are they interested in? And thankfully, Toyota has a great reputation when it comes to their manufacturing efforts and a lot of those things. And so people have shown a lot of interest in that. I think at times, I think some brands maybe don't want to gravitate towards those conversations, but Toyota supporters really do know that Toyota puts that big foot forward. And so, yeah, we've had great success even on social talking about those things. It's not always just, here's a new 4Runner, bye.
So if you can kind of walk me through what a project looks like, when someone comes to you with an ask or when a vehicle, you're saying the 4Runner, what's the process for you in terms of start to finish from when you get an art ask or whatever you would call it to finally getting up on TikTok or social?
I'm sure people would be surprised to hear that it's, not always a one-size-fits-all approach, and the asks never come the same way either. There's some that serendipitously come about to us. There's some that our agency finds because obviously, the rest of Saatchi is so involved in the long-term operations and they know what's going to be coming that sometimes we actually come up with, an idea and bring it to the client as a surprise. But when you talk about something like the 4Runner reveal per se, that was a couple months ago, that definitely, our team has gotten a lot better about getting those things on our radar faster and sooner. That wasn't, necessarily always the case from the social side, for, whatever reason. But it has become a lot easier for us to now know, okay, well, they're going to be announcing this in a couple months. So not only does that sort of inform us from a social creative standpoint of we might need to stop creating assets with the old 4Runner, right? We're not going to do a ground up production with a model that's going to be outgoing in a couple of months. So that's just the first very immediate answer for us, which is always nice to have that purview and have that visibility. From getting something live on TikTok, the first thing we really do is try to learn from the product experts and the marketing teams at Toyota who know those things in and out and sort of what's the sell, right? Obviously it's new, it's a full redesign. There's probably something new under the hood, generally speaking. Are there new off-road features? Are there new colors, trims, whatever that might be? That's sort of the first place to start is, okay, what are we actually looking at here and what's the hook? Because when we think about any creative problem for social, particularly, I'm sure you see it and know it, the attention span is so short. So we know we need a hook. We need to grab somebody. So that's sort of the first thing that we always think about with anything. But yes, when we're thinking just specifically around a reveal of a vehicle, we want to know the ins and outs of what are we anticipating? What are we going to talk about? What are people going to be excited about? Or can we get ahead of something maybe people won't love, right? Maybe we introduce something that people aren't a huge fan of. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes. And so all of those things play into that. But then from a creative execution standpoint, the other really great thing is understanding, are there existing productions that Saatchi&Saatchi will be doing with, say, that vehicle? And can we tap into that, right? Is there a way that we can make something that is designed specifically for social, right? Those shoots typically deal with, well, they know they need assets for the press release and the website. And that's fair game. That's where people are going to go to learn about it. But social now is such a massive factor in that, automotive brands are live streaming the reveals on Instagram or on YouTube, or, obviously our social posts go out at the same time as the press releases go live and embargo lifts. So how do we now evolve the way that we capture that social content, and can we make something that's totally unique? And so our team has very thankfully been able to really work with a lot of the teams lately on those things to understand, well, we need a TikTok, and a TikTok video can't really look like a commercial, right? You might make a video for on stage at that reveal, or that will live on YouTube. But unfortunately, and I think we can get into this as we go, but TikTok is not that. And we know now that won't perform. So we actually need to get up and close and personal with the vehicle in a different way. And so yeah, we start to formulate all of those things, and we go to our PR social client and kind of let them know, here's our plan, here's our production thoughts, here's our posting cadence, right? How much support does this vehicle need? And with a 4Runner, it needs a lot. People want to know a lot, and there was a lot of news around new trims and things like that. So yeah, those are, again, a scatterbrained answer, but it's kind of, we have to take in all of the inputs and deliver them to our client in one succinct way, and say, this is what we want to do, and these are the steps it's going to take to get there. And then after we kind of put those in front of them, then we make a publishing plan. They understand the cadence we want to have. When are we going to go out? How frequently in the first couple months are we going to talk about it? Then we write copy. All of those things are very much informed by the great people that write those press releases, right? The VMAC teams that are so informed and clued in, they're running the show. They know those vehicles. So we very much take cues from them on, what should we focus on? What's the tone? How does the 4Runner differentiate? How are we going to talk to that audience, and how's it going to differentiate from, say, a Tacoma audience or a Tundra audience, right? So there are those nuances there. So those come after the fact, a little bit closer to the finish line before the reveal, as those messaging key points are kind of put together by other great teams. We just kind of take receipt of everything.
So in terms of the ideation process when a new vehicle launches, or you're creating content for a new vehicle, what does that look like for you guys? Are you guys pulling inspiration from stuff that already exists? Are you literally, presenting the client with ideas and then saying, we'll wait till right when we're about to kind of create the stuff to kind of see what's trending? And then are you also building stuff based on data? Like, do you kind of put stuff, look at what you've done in the past and be like, well, this didn't work, this did work, this didn't work, this did work. So these are what we kind of like. And then when does that affect the process of the creative? Is it something you've done at the beginning? Is it something where you create a bunch of ideas and then the client gets to chime in, and then you look at statistics and then it's cut out? Or what's kind of the process for that? It's
a great question. It's definitely, I think, a little closer to the last 2 points you made rather than the first, unfortunately, just with reveals being, oftentimes so close guarded, right? We don't have the best access to something, right? If we want to generate something on our own. So in terms of the creative for a reveal, my team personally does not have much hand in, driving the look and feel per se, right? That's not to say that we don't have a hand in, like, if we want to make a new video. So when it comes to the images, those are going to be shot by incredible photographers that we will use. We will just use those because we know they work on platforms like Instagram carousels or Facebook multi-images. But when it comes to making an Instagram reel or a TikTok, we do look at the data. You're right. And that sort of harkens back to one of the things I mentioned, a little bit ago, is for TikTok to succeed for a reveal, we've tried the polished videos and we've tried the very rough and tumble iPhone sort of video, right? Shooting 60 frames per second on an iPhone now, especially with how good they are, and really getting somebody at a raw, unfettered look at the vehicle up close. that's going to work. So that creative execution, we did take months and months to sort of get to that point and understand, okay, we can't actually come to people with what we maybe are producing somewhere else. We have to come to them with something that they're on that platform to see. They're not there to see our, our linear spots, as amazing as they are. They are here to see something that is something like they would make. And that's really, I think, the interesting part of TikTok. So we do look at that data to understand, well, okay, so just from a pure tools perspective, what we're going to use to produce the video, we know what we have to do. But when it comes to the final product of, say, a script or the final footage we have, again, it comes down to really what we have access to. We've gotten a lot better, and we've worked with incredible teams at Saatchi&Saatchi to, join them on those Code Red productions to understand, can we kind of be a fly on the wall within your set? And that's really what it comes down to is at times it can be what's available, right? And what are we able to just capture in the moment? So it's a little bit of a rock and a hard place, but we found it works incredibly, incredibly well. So we're super fortunate to now have this new working process. Yeah, unfortunately for the reveal videos and things like that, we don't often get to sit down and storyboard our own thing and work through what we want it to be. That's done at a higher level for, the people that are going to be presenting on stage, or the videos that are going to live on YouTube and things like that. So yeah, it's a little bit different, but I love the working process we've built.
So now that the vehicle's been out for a while, what is the process in terms of generating content for a particular vehicle, how often, and then kind of ideation for that?
I think one of the programs that you're familiar with, the Creator Network program, right, where we put together these ground up shoots, and in the past they've been stills only. We've been evolving those to be video as well, focusing a little bit more on Instagram Reels. Can we kill, a couple birds with one stone on these sets? It's definitely not easy always, especially, with the constraints that we have. But so we will put together a shoot specifically for the 4Runner, and that will be a ground up production. And that'll generally feed us with social content for maybe 8 to 10 months. And so that will be our one for the year, usually maybe 1 to 2 bigger shoots supporting that. Just knowing that we have, like I said, there's 20 some vehicles across Toyota's full lineup that we do need to do shoots for, and we're a small team. But that's not to say that's the only time. So another program of content generation that we are, doing is I would say similar to the Creator Network, but it's different, very different in the execution, is working with TikTok creators. And so we have great partners that, we're working with to help source and build out a TikTok creator program. Again, the burden isn't falling on us as much, but we're also getting diverse voices that can, do different creative executions that are native to the platform, that we can ship vehicles to that are in different locations across the country. All of those things we're trying to keep in mind so that we're not just, if we wanted to film something run and gun, we're not just doing it at a warehouse, picking up the vehicle and that's it. So there's that. So there will definitely be, and there actually was recently a 4Runner video that we're super proud of that went on TikTok and Instagram around the new 4Runners, trying to play into this trend that we had seen very in like renovation spaces, but it was the I'm not sad, I just needed X. And a lot of times it was like I needed to redo my kitchen, or I needed this or that or whatever, or a vacation somewhere. So we did our own version of that, kind of transitioning from the old generation 4Runner to the new gen, 5th to 6th, and it did really well. And that was just filmed in an afternoon at the warehouse. And so there's definitely going to continue to be those moments where we can do a really quick and nimble production. But when it comes to full ground up productions, they're not as easy to do multiple times for one vehicle in a fiscal year.
When you guys put together the creative brief for content that you're going to be creating, do you have different asks? And how different are they from, say, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram?
Yeah, they're pretty different. That's the interesting part, is trying to get so many deliverables out of one thing. Max Franklin, shout out to my predecessor. He, when he created the Creator Network, it was, like I said, stills only. It was much more turnkey during his time as my mentor, and as he was leaving, Instagram Reels really blew up. This was 3-4 years ago. So we realized, okay, well, we have to fit into this, and we had to figure out, how does Toyota fit here and how do we do it well? And so those Creator Network shoots started to evolve to that. And that was prior to us being on TikTok, right? And so the natural evolution was, well, we're seeing Instagram Reel videos are very polished, right? Really cool storytelling. Just it's all shot vertically. It's a little different. But, a lot of those things that really hadn't come to pass quite yet, like TikTok, really drove the decision making there, and those still do really well. We still have, audiences have an appetite for that, and they do well on that platform. So there is still that, okay, well, now let's get 20, 30, 40 images, but now we're also going to get 4 to 8, Instagram Reel videos. And then TikTok comes along and it's like, okay, well, how do we now tackle this? And so that is really 3 separate sort of brief executions of, well, we know that we're going to need these images because the engagement rate on Instagram carousels is still higher for us, generally speaking. I mean, there's certain outliers, and we need these vertical videos for Reels as well as Facebook Reels. But now TikTok comes along, and so there is definitely, the need for those different executions. Again, we're trying our best to figure out, who do we bring onto these sets, right? How many people can come play on this set, or do we need to extend a shoot a couple of days and have a TikTok creator come later? Or is this something our team can just generate, on the side? So there is a lot of that gets discussed. And it's been an interesting evolution, like I said.
The Creative Network, if you can kind of go over what that is and then kind of talk about what you guys are looking for when you're going to hire someone to create this particular content.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things is with Creator Network, our budgets are limited, right? And so we want to find photographers or videographers that maybe are a little bit up and coming and maybe are, willing to play in the sandbox with us and say, hey, we're open to your, how many days you might want to do it. But people who are really experimenting as well. But the other really big component that I think drove Creator Network, especially in the beginning, was finding creators who are native to a certain space. We have a sort of creative vision in mind for the Prius surfing look. And, we need a photographer that actually probably knows that space, right? Knows those locales, can shoot that sort of sport, or maybe knows people in that scene, right? So that's very much an important aspect of it, is making sure that anybody that is behind the camera or working on, the shoot has done it before, knows the space, can speak authentically to that space. But yeah, we're also looking for people that are just trying new things, have a different look and feel at times, because that's really the beauty of the Creator Network is there are, of course, brand standards for Toyota that we want to always follow. But social media has been a great place where Toyota has been able to really kind of loosen those restrictions, right? It's social. It's a lot faster. They're more experimental. They're open to that. And so we want to find people that are trying something new. And so we have vehicles that fit a natural scene, like the Land Cruiser per se. We wanted to do a shoot and for Creator Network, and I was like, well, we need some geographical diversity. We can't just shoot everything in Alabama hills outside of LA, contrary to popular belief. So why don't we go to Oregon? We can try to go to Oregon. We can find some people that maybe not are from Oregon or they live close by, but they've been there. We know that we've seen them execute beautiful work. They do stills and video. That's just a bonus. That doesn't happen very often, but something like that can help drive it. And so really what we do then is we put together the creative broad overview, right? We sort of put together the building blocks, the initial broad brushstroke, if you will, of, hey, it's like a math problem. We want to put a Land Cruiser in Oregon, and we want to do a surfing creative or hiking or whatever it may be just in the Pacific Northwest. And we're going for sort of this seasonality, this sort of vibe for the assets. We go to the creator with that. We have a certain set of deliverables in mind. And if they're on board, we basically just let's say like, well, we're looking for you to basically produce the rest, right? Just kind of fill in the dots, right? We gave you what we have in mind, but we're very open to your expertise, your POV, your editing style, your shooting style, the people you have around you, if you want to bring them involved. They basically fill in the rest of the dots. We work with them. They help delineate what that creative is specifically going to look like. What are those deliverables going to look like? What are each of the narratives in the videos? What are some of those locations we'll shoot at? What are the shot setups, props we want to get involved in, everything like that. So that's really the working process there, and a little bit of a thought behind sort of just how we initiate all of that. And then the deliverables, can change depending on sort of however many assets we've had from other teams, or if we still have assets from a previous shoot. We might just need to lean a little bit more into video. We might want to do stills only. We've done that. We still go back to that here and there just because we know stills work. They're much more turnkey productions as well, generally speaking. That's really the thought process there behind Creator Network, at least to get us, initiated.
After you've created content, what sort of data or algorithmic information are you looking at in order to be able to decide whether something was successful? And then what in that data gets you to make a decision about something going forward? It's a
tough question too, because I'm sure you've had some like this. I've had plenty of my own shoots that the creative ideation was mine. The creator that we brought in was the one I brought in. We shot everything to a T. It looks beautiful. It looks cinematic. I love it. The vehicles, it's everything the clients wanted. It's everything that we wanted, but it still doesn't perform, right? There is that nebulous sort of factor to social media, when it comes to performance, particular organic performance. It is hard to balance what we gauge as a success sometimes, but you're right. I mean, the numbers it's what I'm measured on. It's what my team's measured on. It's, what our clients look at.
So it's not necessarily interactions, or it's just visibility, or what is kind of the...
Our metric is engagement rate. So generally just the total engagements over the reach or the impressions based on the platform is generally, it's, that's not the only thing, but that is sort of the one consistent North Star we can give, is how many people saw this, and then how many people actually chose to like it, share it, save it, comment on it, show their love for it. So that's sort of I would say the simplest North Star metric. When we look at specific creative for maybe different partnerships, things like that, there are really great metrics that we can still lean on and show our client and be proud of, right? One of those being, and this video did incredible, we're super happy with it, but we partnered with an incredible TikTok creator, and we still do, Pushing Pistons. He's awesome. But he filmed a GR Corolla video for us a couple years ago that was how to drive manual in the GR Corolla. Went live on TikTok, and I think it's at like nearly 5 million organic views, but the engagement rate is also incredible. I mean, it's still performed well, but one of the largest categories of engagements was saves, believe it or not, which I thought was interesting. I was like, are people going to use this to learn how to drive manual? What are they saving it later for? Which is super interesting. Or they just found it really fascinating because it was how to drive manual in under 60 seconds. And so, yes, there are certainly moments where we can point to each other or our client and say, maybe some of these metrics didn't do well, but look at the reach that it garnered, right? There's a lot of people that, previously didn't know about this initiative and now do. And we particularly see that a lot when we're talking about some of those things that you mentioned, like manufacturing, right? Or any of those other sort of corporate stories that are important, but maybe aren't as eye-catching as just promoting a new Tacoma. But if they actually get a ton of reach and new eyeballs on this story, that's considered a win at times, right? It's nobody knew about this investment that Toyota's made, this big initiative that Toyota's made domestically. And so, yes, that's definitely a moment where I think those other metrics are important. Simple answer, generally engagement rate. We want to know that while it is reaching new people, the people that it is reaching actually do still like it as it continues to grow. So
for me, can you break up the consumer/demographic by platform in terms of who it is that you're targeting on each platform?
Off the top of my head at the moment, no. There are definitely differences. Age, I think, would be the easiest probably, right? When you think about TikTok, that's definitely generally a younger audience. We've had a good amount of growth of female fans on TikTok, which has been interesting. Toyota, an automotive brand, primarily male audience we've had for at least as long as I've been here on other platforms. So that's been really cool and interesting to see. But in terms of location, other demographic factors or psychographic factors, I off the top of my head, no. That is something that we do keep in mind as we talk about what is the level of support for certain vehicles or trims or things on different platforms. Who is where, right? Are we actually speaking to the people that want to see it or need to see it? But off the top of my head, I don't have that.
At what point in the process does consumer and demographic become a part of the conversation in the content you're creating?
Probably at 2 times. First, from a just overall fiscal planning discussion. Like I said, how much money do we need to invest specifically in one type of vehicle for content, a certain type of content, if we know that audience that's either interested or buying that vehicle is not there, right? And so we have vehicles that are targeted to an older demographic, right? Or a higher income level. They're not our audience on TikTok at the moment, and they're not even really a large user base on TikTok necessarily. I can't say that with 100% certainty, but I would say that comes into play there when we're just figuring out how do we allocate funds and production time and creative ideation. And then again, it probably just comes back in later when we're thinking about cadence. As we build out our quarterly calendars and we look ahead to just the year and, cultural moments and building out our content cadence on different platforms, that's probably the other time it comes in is do we need to be sharing more about the Sienna on Instagram than Facebook, when we know Facebook's probably the better place for us to be with it right now. That's a one-off example. I love you, the Sienna, sorry. But yes, that is those are probably the 2 places. I mean, it does come into play creatively as well as we think about talent. So I'm just backtracking on my answer for you right now. It's kind of subconsciously ingrained in everything. It's not something we consciously discuss. I'm not going to build out a creative direction, 4Runner TRD Pro with something that makes no sense. We have to speak accurately. I'm not going to put a Sienna on a track with GR vehicles either, right? That's an egregious example. There are those moments as well when you have to think about who the audience, not only for the platform is, but the vehicle is. Who's that consumer and how do we talk to them?
Right. Yeah, I can't imagine you doing like a midlife crisis piece on TikTok anytime soon.
Yeah, no. I will say I was surprised. I'm super thrilled about it, but we had a Sienna video go out because the new 2025 Sienna was actually revealed a couple weeks ago. And we did a video on TikTok and it did incredible. And I was like, oh, okay. You know, at first glance, you think maybe it's not going to resonate with that audience, but that is actually one of the more interesting things about TikTok's algorithm is if it starts to resonate well, it will actually push it out further and further, far beyond who your specific followers are. There's always pleasant surprises there.
There's a show like Naked Afraid. The guy who won, it was the battle of the best or whatever, where, you know, like they have like, there's a little bit of competition within the surviving for 40 days. But the guy who won was kind of this family man. You know, it was like I drive a minivan. You know, I have a family. Like, how would you ever take something like that and then lend it to, oh, that would be great for us to have this person as like a spokesperson to hit this type of demographic, you know, because this was, you know, we'll make him our minivan guy and, you know, and help them out. So when does something like that ever happen? And if so, like, how does that work with, rather than creating content for a particular consumer, you're taking an event or something that's happened and trying to make it your own?
That's definitely where the other incredible teams at Saatchi come in. There's a lot of teams that work in that space. You know, in particular, the earned media team at Saatchi&Saatchi, our colleagues that work a lot with those influencer and creator contracts, and they find a lot of those people, as well as our sponsorship and engagement team. They keep their finger on their pulse, a lot of those things, a lot of times. That's not to say that we don't always. It's sometimes more difficult for us to maybe ladder up that idea and option and decision on our path within the organization, right? There are other teams that are better equipped for that. But that's not to say that we haven't talked about it, right? I've seen, you know, you bring up Sienna, I guess, Sung Kang from Fast and Furious, love him, love Han. He drives a Sienna, and he's gone on so many podcasts saying that he loves the Sienna because it's got so many cup holders and it's just the best commuter car. And I'm like, how do we get him? You know, that's a decision I think for a better equipped team than myself. But yeah, that definitely is something that does get circulated quite often. I'm sure there's examples of that happening. I just have to think of them. Might take me a little while.
You create content specifically for your channels. Do you also create content for other channels in order to target maybe have a little bit more of a demographic reach that you don't necessarily get within your own channel? And then with those reaches, are there often collaborations with other brands and other products to be able to target a different consumer?
Not necessarily, again, emanating specifically from our team, but there are a lot of brand collaborations. You know, most recently, we've had a couple with Huff, been really awesome. They've been doing that for the past couple of years. So it's a kind of a custom clothing line that they make. This year was based on, you know, Land Cruiser. Last year was based on the Tundra. And so there are these really fun sort of TRD homages and old Land Cruiser homages that are worked within the creative. And so that's been a fun brand collaboration between us and them. Similarly, Huck is another one. They did a great Tacoma apparel collaboration. But in terms of us creating content for other channels to try to pull in those different audiences, not necessarily, no. There are other teams in the paid social side that kind of work with some of that targeting more than our team on the organic side. But that's not to say that those collaborations aren't pretty consistently ongoing. Generally, we work with them on more social strategy more than anything else, not as much the creative execution. Those brands oftentimes come already well equipped with incredible creative directors that are already, you know, well ahead of us on sort of what they envision it can be and sort of what's, you know, gotten down to our team. But yes, the brand partnerships we have seen, you know, are great. They're fun opportunities. People always like them because it's kind of an interesting, you know, it's a different way to see a brand you thought maybe sat in its own silo. And seeing some of that cross collaboration is pretty fun. But it also kind of, you know, puts you out of your own shell a little bit, right? Seeing, oh, Toyota and Huff, you might not have thought of initially for that partnership, but it's been awesome. People have responded really well, both in the social space and with the apparel. People seem to like it. Yes, there is a bit of that, but it's definitely more of a full agency team effort. There are teams that work on the digital side, paid social side, sponsorship side that kind of work more closely with all of that.
So you've been there for 5 years, right?
So
in that 5 years, when you first started to now, how has social evolved from where it was, you know, 5 years ago to where it is now within its relationship to an agency and a client like Toyota?
Not hopefully speaking out of turn, but, being not just within an agency, like a social agency, but within a broader advertising agency. I think it's been interesting to see our role specifically on social, as well as just in advertising, kind of the shift as all of media moves over. It's not just the past 5 years, the past decades, right? As certain FCC rulings have changed and the modes of communication have changed, right? Social media has forced a lot of people to ingest information from a one-to-many source, like news used to be, to now many to many. And social media obviously has propelled all of that. And I think one of the biggest things that I've seen that now change, and this isn't just 5 years, right? But I will say, within my 5 years here in terms of creative execution and meeting people where they're at, it's definitely changed that creative execution. Stripping everything back on platforms specifically like TikTok has been wildly counterintuitive. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, on our team within an incredible advertising agency that makes some of the best ads and most notable ads in the world, having to say, hey, we're actually gonna, film this on an iPhone and we're gonna edit it in CapCut. And that's what's gonna be sort of that moment for the reveal of the vehicle or whatever it is, right? That's not to say that those degrade any of the incredible work that is happening. But I think that's been one of the most interesting things about social is when I started at FH and even before that, and for the longest time, a lot of the creative look and feel of social was that very aspirational, right? Drones, right? And that's still there. That's still a very valuable thing. But it is very interesting to see, it move away from just influencers who are somewhere that you can't be and, trying to be this unattainable, unreachable thing to TikTok has sort of upended that and now following that is Reels and people wanting to see, like I said, an unvarnished, raw, up-close look at a brand and a vehicle. And I commend Toyota for being so quick to adapt that, as well as Saatchi, right? It's not an easy conversation to have with people that are trying to do the best work. And it's not to say that we're not doing our best work either, but it is about understanding what is the vehicle, what is the way that you want to move this topic and put it in front of people, and understanding you have to meet them where they're at. And so that's been, I think, the most interesting thing. I mean, aside from all of the other platform changes, companies being bought, TikTok, whether or not it's going to stick around, but I do think that above all else, the platform changes with Reels and Instagram carousels and other features like stories, I think that probably is one of the most interesting things I've seen aside from algorithms, is just the way that people have sort of forced social media content to go back a bit to sort of what they want to see rather than us feeding them something that they maybe wouldn't really resonate with. That's just to me been the most interesting thing is, okay, if you would have told me 5 years ago that we revealed a new 4Runner, the video that we film on an iPhone would do better than a polished one, I would laugh in your face for whatever reason. I think it's a return to the forms of many-to-many communication and people really wanting to be met where they're at. It's, I think, super interesting.
In terms of visibility, when Toyota creates commercial and then you're creating social content, how much visibility is the content you're creating for that particular product getting in relationship to a commercial that's made for, say something like Sienna or Corolla? Ad spend, I imagine it's changed a lot in the last 5 years in terms of where money goes to develop and spend for ad placement versus, for TV, commercials, online, YouTube streaming versus social. So what kind of a ratio is that changed for you since?
We have a lot more visibility now as a team into the rest of it, which is good. In terms of a ratio, I don't know if I can speak fully to that. The visibility has gotten incredibly open, which is really nice. Taking an example of, something different than a vehicle, but understanding the new Toyota partnership with the NFL, right? We announced that last year. Our team has had a lot of purview since the very beginning into all of that. Whether or not that was helping just consult, there are creatives that are working on those, the spots and the announcements, and they do an incredible job, but we're at least in the room and we're understanding and helping kind of share like, okay, well, where's it going to live, right? Is there a paid placement, right? Is there an ad spend on announcing that? Is it going to run during halftime at, Monday Night Football, or is it only going to be on social? And how can we tailor make different creative for those different placements? So that in and of itself has been, I think, an incredible growth and opportunity, just continuing to think about advertising moving forward. You can do one thing on Monday Night Football with a placement to kind of get that news out to those fans in that way that they're used to seeing it. But if you want to draw a more organic connection between yourself and the NFL and the players that we contract, there are different ways to do that on social media. There are different executions we can do that are a little bit more playful, play into what's happening in the moment, right? Or cultural moments, things like that. I don't know if that actually answers your question. I apologize, but I do think that that visibility has been, bar none, just far and away incredible. It's definitely helped shape the different ways that you can, again, meet people where they are.
Yeah, I mean, it almost feels like it was 20-1 5 years ago, and then now it's like 3-1, in terms of the ratio of visibility. When you're doing what you do, how do you address politics and, say, the negative effects of social media? Do you take those into consideration? And how does that affect what you do? Because I know it feels like right now that a lot of people are hesitant to generate content because they're kind of waiting for the election to kind of end. And it also seems like a lot of people pulled money from future quarters to pay for Olympic content that they created, and then kind of like waiting for the dust to settle and maybe interest rates to come down to kind of address some of this stuff. So maybe you can speak to some of those things.
Yeah, I mean, from the broader agency side, I definitely can. I don't have that level of purview. But from the social side, yes. I mean, you're definitely right. Especially nowadays, right? Major events seem to happen every other week. Very cognizant effort by, not just our team, but Toyota within and of itself. There are people that monitor these things and keep everyone in the loop on sort of what is the tone of the country right now, right? There's a lot that can happen. There definitely is a lot of care taken to be sensitive to those things, whatever those may be. If we need to go quiet, we have a full-scale effort to make sure that happens. There's no social content needed for that right now. And the election is a great example of that. There's certainly, I think, it's going to be probably pretty quiet for a lot of people on their algorithms on that day. Just knowing, I think, from a brand safety standpoint, it's probably going to be a good idea a couple of days that week to be quiet. But in terms of content, just overall generation, not just in the publishing and trying to be sensitive to what's going on in current news, the larger trend of social media continues to be one that plagues our team, I'm sure, and it's something that we want to be sensitive to. That's the trickiest part of being a social media manager sometimes is, how do you disconnect, right? How do you not devote all of your time, and how do you not inundate your team's time to staying on top of trends? And so there's certain things like that within our internal team that we try to schedule time each week, right? We don't want it to just be always constantly online, scouring for the trends. We have set up time each week that we kind of, okay, everyone take a little bit of time. Let's sit down. Let's kind of run through what are we seeing? What's the latest? That's, I think, a good, at least, stopgap for our team to give us a little bit of that break, but it doesn't necessarily stop it. Even in my own personal life, I'm constantly on social media. But the effect that we have on people as well is one that you can't take lightly. That form of creative content on platforms like TikTok that don't seem unattainable to people is helpful. I think it's nice to just see, what you came there to see in a way, and in an environment and an execution that you can feel approachable to, rather than us saying, look at this gorgeous thing in this gorgeous place with these gorgeous people, this thing you can never attain. That's more nebulous and not something that, I can plant my flag on. But I do think that is something that hopefully continues to help and shape a little bit less of the negative emotions that can stem from social media. But it's a tough question for sure. I mean, it's definitely not something to take lightly.
Are you guys creating as much content as you were a year ago? Or are you doing, what would you say is like the production ratio to content generation? Has it gotten less, or is it about the same?
I think it's shifted. I think it actually might net out as a little bit more. It's just different now, because I look back at when I first started, and you were doing awesome shoots with Max when I first started. And I looked at, the creator network shoots that he could fit in a year when we were just doing the stills and they were a couple of days. He was doing like 12 of those one year. And I look back at that and I think, that must have been so inundating. But with it being stills only, I'm like, okay, well, I'm sure it was still inundating, but now we have to have a TikTok creator involved in the schedule. We have a video team as well that's sort of leading the way on production and direction, and a stills photographer. We do fewer of the creator network shoots, but we try to use the full buffalo with that production for that car, knowing it's a huge priority for us. While that number has shrunk, the other productions have continued. We do stills only shoots for sort of another tier of vehicles that we still do throughout the year. And then we do a lot of shadow shooting. So like I said, with 4Runner coming out, how do we piggyback on that production, right? And so our team can attend. We maybe can bring someone along, fingers crossed, to help with productions there. So that the way that we've created content has definitely shifted, and we do more of these now shadow shoots. We do more of these tier 2 shoots. creator network did shrink a little bit. It's about finding balance of what is the value in each of those and how do we get the content we need in a timely manner, knowing, reveals are coming or a campaign is coming or whatever that might be. I think we net out actually as we generate more content. It's shifted a bit though. There is more, we've put an emphasis on in-house production for our team, just knowing that there are those sticky moments where we can't always bring our own guys in a full production. But yeah, I think we'd net out roughly the same, if not a little bit more.
You have your own production crew and then you also outsource production crew. Is that what I'm understanding correctly?
It's generous to say it's a production crew, but within our small team, yes, myself and Allie Cochran on our team do, attend the shoots. We have, the ability to help with some of those needs, like I said, with some of that raw, more unvarnished content. But then, yes, typically we like to rely on bringing on a freelance shooter for, to capture stills, behind the scenes or as a shadow shooter, or upcoming right now next week, we're doing something that will be, shadow shooting video and stills. But yes, we've tried to take advantage of the production prowess we have on our team that we're super proud of, and just understanding that there aren't always moments where we can really insert ourselves into an existing production and we have to kind of handle it ourselves and sort of be more flies on the wall. It's been a slow rollout, right? We want to make sure we're doing this right. We want to make sure we're not blindsiding other teams within the agency or clients at Toyota. It's been a really great reception to it. And I think that'll open the door for us to have a more formal approach to continuing to bring more people in from the outside that are, candidly, better than myself.
AI. What sort of role does AI play in how you guys currently create content?
AI, right now, Saatchi itself and our parent company, Publicis Group, have definitely encouraged the use with certain programs. They've allowed they approved certain programs for us to use that, they got to be safe about it, right? We can't go and start stealing artists' famous work and things like that. But they have encouraged the agency. And Saatchi&Saatchi, I will say, I don't know, it's awesome. They actually just did an AI short film festival where they had teams sign up and each create their own short films using generative AI and then compete against one another. And I think the results are coming soon for that, which will be pretty cool to see who wins. But yeah, so there's definitely, I think within the agency, there are a lot of people that are smartly pushing for exploration into it and understanding. Within our team, the main place that it really becomes beneficial is either an idea for a project or an ask to pitch something. And we really need visuals that can help, sell in what we're trying to do, right? A specific shot or some bombastic thing we want to put somewhere, whatever it is. That is always the most helpful for those sort of internal presentations and pitches. Those are really, really helpful. Otherwise, we've seen some other teams, Toyota Canada, TCI in particular, I believe they've used generative AI in social posts. They had some really fun ideas of how to sort of, what would you envision a truck as a car or something, or as a shoe, right? So there are some of those things that we haven't, at least on my team, pushed through and really externally used. But I would say right now it's the best, most efficient way for our time with a small team is to help convey some of those more nebulous, high concept things and really get clients on board with what that visually might look like in the end.
So would you say that you guys use it more as like an additional tool in your tool belt, or is it something you guys are looking to replace something else that you guys do?
I don't think it'll replace anything in the near future for us. But yes, it's more of just a tool in the tool belt at the moment. Yeah.
With the possibility of TikTok going away, something could happen with Elon and he could self-destruct and blow up X. There's Instagram and Facebook controlled by the same company. You have a lot of streaming now. It's kind of hard to get commercials in there. It seems like with streaming, unless it's ad supported, tiered streaming. And then, you have commercials during YouTube or, with people on Twitch or you have pop-up menus on streaming. Where do you kind of see the future of what you do and maybe the next year or two?
I think I got to start updating my resume. I don't know. We'll see. Just kidding. That's a really, really tough question. The future of where I see what I do, I don't know if it's naive of me. I don't know if it'll ever really go away. I think it'll change. And I think that's one of the things I would tell anybody that was trying to get into this world. No matter what the product is or the platform is, there's always going to be a need for people and corporations to connect with other people in unique and organic ways, right? Authentic ways. And there's always going to be a need for people to require your help at something, right? And so it's more of looking at what are the soft skills, what are the parts of the job that I most enjoy or you most enjoy in what you do, and being able to apply those elsewhere. In terms of where I see, social media though, I don't know. I don't know if it'll go away, right? With the death of Vine, there's always something else that sprouts up after, right? And so if TikTok does go away, I see Instagram really, I don't know how well they will execute it, but they already are, right? They're kind of mimicking some of the changes that TikTok is trying to implement. You see sort of there's the joke, it's, whatever's on Instagram Reels was on TikTok a month ago. I think Reels will try to pick up that baton even more so, but that's not to say that there might just be something completely new that takes that place. In terms of, where do I see what I do going? That is a very hard question to answer. But in a nutshell, I don't know if it'll ever go away. It might look a little different, but I just don't think it'll go away. Even in a world of pay to play, right? Paid social is obviously so important and targeted, and it's probably more impactful, but that we have to remember that's not inherently why people come on social media. They come to see spotlight of the car that they own, or, sharing their own, build with somebody. They came here to see what the new news is. They didn't necessarily come for that. When we think about the social media landscape, your organic profile on a platform is kind of your front lawn. That's where people come to meet you.
Is part of what you do exploring other avenues of engaging with the consumer, or are you just kind of Facebook, Instagram, TikTok?
It's an ebb and flow percentage on how much we do explore other platforms. It's not a large percentage of my team's job though. No, we're trying to be on the horizon and understand what other teams within the network or, what other things are popping up in the news. I don't devote a ton of time personally on our team to trying to dig into what that next big thing is, because from an agency perspective and a brand safety perspective, it's going to take a little while anyway. Those gears are going to grind a little slower to really jump in those waters. Even though I'm so proud of us and Toyota for jumping in 2 years ago into TikTok, it's not a secret we weren't the first there, right? Brands like Porsche were there long before us. So that's not to say that we don't need to understand what's coming and what maybe new avenues we have. There just isn't always a really big need, right? When Threads came along, we of course claimed a Toyota USA Threads account, never really saw the need to activate there. And that could change, right? Anything can change in a minute. No, I don't spend a lot of my days and weeks digging into what that next new niche platform is.
Is there anything you would change about this process, of like creating content for social? Is there anything you think that would be way more effective or that you wish you were able to tap into with the consumer to be able to get them what they want?
That's the tough part of doing social for companies is none of it is necessarily smooth sailing all the time. So I'm sure there's plenty of processes or tools or things that I would love to be able to use, or, for things I would love to circumvent, but that can't happen. But no, I can't think of anything that would help us, better connect or give consumers what they want on the platforms. There are a lot of tools and things already readily available to us that have made, like you asked 5 years ago, our job a lot easier. Like when it comes to video editing software, it's far and away so much easier and more incredible for, and they're built natively for these platforms and things like that. So that in and of itself has already, made my life easier. But otherwise I can't think of anything, no.
Bonus Chit Chat. Oh yeah, Chit Chat.
I was just scrolling through my Facebook, and this popped up, and I'm like, wait, this is just a regular dude. And I looked, I couldn't find the dude anywhere. It's Arm & Hammer laundry detergent. Found another one, like just some person kind of going in and doing like a mattress testing. I go into the Arm & Hammer laundry website, and they have all these people with all these products. Yep. And I go to this person, and it's this partnership, H partner, and then, from this person, I go to this person. I'm like, oh, they must be famous. No, it's just 9,000 people.
Macro influencers.
Not a lot going on, age, race, every single thing you can possibly think of. Publicis Group, which also owns Saatchi, picked up Influential, which has 3.5 million content creators, and they're analyzing 100 billion data points daily. They can literally convert ad sales into revenue. They're basically matching me with somebody else that's exactly like me that's using a product that I don't have.
Yeah.
Normally, you're looking at commercials and it's that shiny object, and I usually kind of like go fast because I don't want to be advertised to. And then you have stuff like this where it's like, oh, is it an ad? Well, why does it say hashtag ad if it's just a regular person doing regular everyday stuff? And why are they reaching out to all these people who don't have hundreds of thousands of followers to create this type of content? They're putting it on their channel and they're not secret about it. Like it says AH partner. And so they've kind of created this entire world of non-commercial based content where you're basically, it's just one person, their phone, the product, and their social feed.
Yeah, we've been moving to that.
So this is something you guys are moving into.
Kind of talked about, the TikTok content creation that we're working through on our channels, right? There is a bit of a learning from, like I mentioned, our media team that works with the influencers of just kind of understanding, who are they working with? What does that sort of investment look like? Obviously the influencer side of it is different from our content that we're making for Toyota USA, but for them, rather than paying $1 million for one post from a Jenner or someone like that, you can spend half of that budget and get 10 to 15x the amount of deliverables from 10 to 15 different types of people, like you're saying. You can get every demographic, age group. They have macro followings, but they have enough of a following and engagement and in different communities that investment of spending that amount of money to reach different people a little bit better has worked for them, right? They still do larger influencer partnerships, I do believe, right? I'm not the expert on that. That's their world of operations, but yeah, there are absolutely, relationships that they've built and we work with great partners like Captivate. But yes, influential, of course, is going to change sort of how a lot of this, I think, operates. Both from the influencer side, they've found that it's advantageous to invest your money, whether it's a small amount of budget or a large amount of budget in a lot of different places, with those people that may not be as big, but they're closer to, they have those more tight-knit relationships with those people in those specific communities, with their followers that they're a little bit closer to, right? Like you said, you can target someone who is very similar to you, and you're just not using Arm & Hammer, or you're very similar to me, and I don't drive a Toyota, but I can see that. I'm like, oh, wow, okay, well, their lifestyle is very close to mine, attainable to mine. Their story seems a little similar, right? We have similar, interests, things like that. If you were just to put your money behind one really big influencer that's kind of almost unattainable, it's just a different way of approaching it. That's their world. That's not necessarily, I don't want to, put my foot in my mouth and speak out of turn, but there is a bit of both of those worlds to play in. There's benefits to both bigger influencers and smaller. And then for us on the creative side, for Toyota USA content, when we work with creators and we pay them not for their, to be the influencer, we don't necessarily want them to post it on their channels. We want it for us to use. We hire them as content creators. We're looking at what style do they bring, right? How's their filming style unique? Are they nimble? Are they able to tell a story? Do they have a unique way in? And so we work with incredible, honestly, at any given time, 5 to 10 different creators, which we're in the process of doing right now, kind of building a new program up from the ground up. And yeah, not all of them are, have massive followings, but we loved sort of the way they spoke to those audiences, since we know that different vehicles have different consumers. And so we wanted to kind of bring them into the fold and work with them and say, okay, we can either spend half of our team's budget on a handful of larger productions, like the rest of, the agency does, and making commercials, which those are necessary, right? Those are for linear placements and digital placements that are going to live a lot longer. Whereas the shelf life for something that I'm building on an organic platform, that shelf life isn't as long. And so we can work with these people that can tell these interesting stories in a more nimble way, especially since we know the creative pursuit on those platforms, particularly with the push from TikTok, is moving away from the aspirational, real, extra polished type of thing that it used to be maybe a decade ago. It is moving towards people really wanting almost get their hands on the vehicle. They want to kind of see what it really looks like on their phone camera. They want to see as up close and personal as they can from interesting world that we live in, because I think there is obviously still a benefit. We still do larger creator network shoots, like I mentioned, that are important for, I think, broader storytelling as well, because you have to put that investment into a really proper production team if you want to tell a great story. And so there's both sides of that coin that, I'm constantly looking at, and our team is constantly evaluating.
Yeah. 2 episodes after yours, we have Anna Dixon, the VP of Shutterstock. They have a bigger drive now for authenticity more than they ever have. When you have a company like Influence and you're able to take a single dollar of ad spend and know that you're guaranteed $2 in revenue with this particular type of marketing and advertising, why would you do anything else? Content creators versus influencers, direct to marketing versus commercial, which is more like brand awareness and, you know, heritage / nostalgia, things like that. And commercial advertising becomes almost like an experiment. I mean, there's some data-based content. Why would a company that's publicly owned that has a duty to its shareholders to generate revenue and turn profits do anything else but this particular type of content?
It's a very good question. I think we're heading into a brave new world a little bit. Like I said, my purview is very limited, but you beg a good question though. And I think it's one that we've had to, just even my own small world of operating in organic social has had to continue to fight for, is just the rationale of why should we be spending money on something when maybe the return on investment isn't always there, but it's still an important part of it. There is still, like you said, there's still the storytelling, the heritage aspect, the narrative of who the brand is, rather than us just creating something that is, you know, some of the examples we talked about of just showing the vehicle, showing quick highlights of the features, not really putting a face to anything. There's nothing else to it. Those are all beneficial for some things. You also run the risk of losing sort of showing who your brand is. Like you said, I think there is a necessity to that type of production and that type of, you know, generating those broader ads that are going to run on those linear spaces, those billboards, because there's going to be a pretty interesting and difficult leveling of the playing field of allocating funds and understanding where that impact is best felt. But I don't personally see any of that necessarily going away. I can tell you right now, I don't think any client that I've ever worked with or work with currently would want something like, you know, the content that we're building on a platform like TikTok to run as a linear spot for them. I just don't think that look and feel is ever really going to be very comfortable for large brands. Maybe that's me speaking out of turn. I don't think any brand is willing to turn their back on the creative industries that have helped get them to where they are. I don't think they should by any means, but I don't think they ever would either. You're right. I mean, it's a difficult question. You know, you look at things like the film industry as well and moving towards, you know, certain technologies and practices of, you know, whether it's using the LED screens or, you know, eliminating writers' rooms and things. Unfortunately, there is sometimes a top-down threat to some of those creative endeavors in the industry that we work in. And I think in the advertising space, it's going to continue to have both. I think both are very necessary, but we are seeing right now sort of an outsized magnifying glass on social specifically. And it's just about, I think, the half-life. It's the life cycle of something that lives on social sometimes. It just, not all brands see the value, unless you're like Nike, where they post once a month from the Nike, you know, whether it's the running account or Nike, just Nike overall for basketball or whatever it is. They don't post very often, but everything they do post is extremely well executed, right? From the creative ideation to the copywriting to the production to the finishing. It's the ebb and flow constantly that I feel just in my own, like I said, my own sliver of the work that we do is there's great creative that we want to implement, but it comes at a cost. And that's, you know, we're not always the decision makers that get to say when that gets done. And so, you know, Nike, I think, is really one of those brands that I see very little of that type of content we're talking about, right? At least I do think that Nike's really great about continuing really great productions and storytelling. And that's really, I think, where that continues to just be vital.
Well, to speak to that, so for me, the Nike work hasn't fallen off a cliff, but it is slowed down almost to a grinding halt, which is their sales have slumped for the last 3 quarters. They just changed their CEO. So they're going through maybe that isn't working out for them and they're having to start to look at what their other options are. The commercial is advertising to obviously a very broad audience, whereas with social, you can literally target a single individual. It seems like you can be extremely targeted with. I had some people from McCann on and some other advertising agencies, and they're really using this time to kind of reorg themselves and figure out who their vendors are and who's generating their content and getting really specific about their ask. Again, they want more bang for their buck. Do you think that with all this going on right now, that this could probably explain why work has fallen off a cliff? People aren't working. The photographers that I do know, the directors, they're doing 1 or 2 jobs for this year, which is, you know, people that were doing anywhere from 10 to 12.
Honestly, yeah, I do think there's a correlation between those two things. I would say, yeah, it's been a major shift over the past at least just 5 years since I've been at Saatchi. The way that I see things, the productions we run, I think those things absolutely have a hand in that slump of work for sure on the broader creative industry.
I'll wrap this up with just 2 last questions. One, this is going to clean up a lot of people that are industry in terms of, you know, there's a lot of people I know that aren't doing this anymore. If
it becomes just the, hey, we're just doing the Super Bowl and then shooting, images off content we have to do for web so people can be able to see the vehicle when they want more information, versus how do people stay in this business if only a handful of people left that do this stuff? And then the other question is, if Saatchi is going that route, in more that direction of content creators and influencers, what should somebody like myself be doing in order to stay employed if that's the direction? Showed you that Porsche video where that person with zooming in and out. Yeah. Do I find a niche as something that's my thing and do that? And so those two questions. How do you stay? And then what do you do if you do stay?
For me, right, I'm not going to speak on behalf of everyone else that's in this position, at other agencies that have a similar role as me, because I'm building the bike while I ride it. I constantly am figuring things out as I go. I think one of the things that's really been beneficial, and it's one of the things that you've been great about as well with me over the past few years, is just continuing to share the work that you do on those platforms and continuing to network and reach out to the people that you've worked with in the past. That's really been one of the reasons I've been fortunate enough to find and keep in touch with people that are trying new styles of work. They're not necessarily always finding their niche, but whenever they do share their work, the more that they share their work, I'm always like, oh, well, I can see that translating to something that I want to do. One of my, favorite recent photographers we started working with, I found his work. It wasn't even automotive, but I loved what he was doing both in photo and video, and I liked his colors. I loved the way that he edited. I liked the shot ideas that he had. He was showing the spaces that I'd seen before in different ways. And so I was like, okay, this guy seems, to have something that I think my client would like. The only reason I found him was, my Discover page on Instagram, actually. And this was like 3 years ago. And we've worked together, twice now. And one of the things that sort of followed that as well was his willingness to play in our sandbox and then tap into the people around him when he didn't, necessarily know exactly how to execute one thing we were asking him for, because sometimes we asked for a handful of, types of deliverables, and his focus was pretty singularly on one thing. He brought together a great coalition and community of people to help kind of work the budget around needing to shift those things. But I think that's a long way of saying, I think continuing to find ways to share your work. It's the hardest part sometimes, I think. The work is obviously difficult, but you love it. Sharing it is always the hardest part. I'm married to a graphic designer. She hates updating her portfolio, and so right, we all do. I haven't updated anything of my resume, my LinkedIn, anything in ages, but social allows for you to try to be quicker about just deciding how you want to share those things that you've worked on. And I know you've posted a lot of the work that you've done both with us as well as Burrell. And beyond that, but that to me, I think is, as unfortunate as it is one of the best ways for people to start to discover your work in different avenues, rather than actually like the rest of the agency, of course, right? They RFP things, they have, they have production teams that do the outreach for them, right? All of those things. It's just a little bit different. And there's a lot more decision makers in the types of content that are being made. It's no longer just one person or one team within the agency. There are a lot of different people that are given budgets to help generate content for different things. And that just kind of increases that reach.
If at any point in this podcast we did have any influence over the industry and things to just keep in mind, I would just say that if the industry goes this route, if they go the influencer, the content creator route, and they do only want to tap into us for certain specific things, to keep in mind that our hands might end up getting forced, and that may be all that's left for them, because I don't know many people in production that can survive off of 2 or 3 jobs a year, which is kind of been the average for everybody right now. And if our hands do end up being forced, that AI content may be what fills that gap.
But I think one of the silver linings, it's kind of a double-edged sword as I say it, but I think one of the silver linings as well for, those people that have been in this industry for a long time, and you said the work is drying up and they may not feel comfortable or want to do that, type of work. I will say one of the silver linings of it is the timelines on those projects are so much shorter than the stuff that they might be used to. I always kind of joke of there's sort of like a bell curve of, within agencies or corporations, there's a bell curve of the amount of effort and time and money you want to spend on something to where it's diminishing returns. And so many projects I see go well beyond that, to the point of you're tinkering one tiny thing that no one else will notice. And I often see that a lot, and the projects will go on. I mean, pre-production can be 10 months and then month-long production and then another 4, 5, 6 months of post-production on something. Whereas in my space, it's a lot quicker. Again, I think the hard part is fighting for your worth in that space, of course, though, right? I don't want anyone that's been in the industry a long time and is well respected and has made a name for themselves having to, accept budgets that maybe are well below what they want. But I just want to note that is one of I think the silver linings of them is you can fit a lot more of these types of projects into your timeline, a little less scrutinized at times. That's not a blanket statement across the board, but the hamster wheel spins faster and faster, unfortunately. I know that from my own side of it.
Right. As a content creator and somebody who works in production, every year it's like the ask got bigger, the budget gets smaller. And the question becomes, when will it break? And if it does break, what does it look like? I feel like if that question is asked and it's not answered properly, that it's going to affect both worlds. The people that are creating the content are then not going to be available to the people who need the content. Yeah. That's the point at which it breaks. And I would hate for it to go that route. Like you were saying, the most successful people I've had on this podcast are the ones that are putting out work weekly, that are experimenting. Content creation is a part of who they are. And I think those people will survive. But I would hate to lose those people because the shiny object is now the thing that's not shiny anymore. Yeah. Revenue is everything, right? I see a lot of job forums where people in tech are, that were working on the big AI boom are now out. Now the products are launches and companies like Apple want to see the return on their investment. Great, we built it. Let's let it generate revenue because we can't say anything more. Then we'll be in the red and investors don't like that. You saw what happened. Meta had to rebrand and the whole thing.
We're coming up at I think a pretty pivotal fork in the road. It is always a tough ask is what's the ROI? What's the value? What are we going to get if we spend, $100,000 on a shoot versus $20,000 on a shoot? Is it going to perform better? Unfortunately, sometimes, that's not the case, but there is, I think, still a necessity to those things. They're important to tell the story of the brand.
And going that route affects you guys hugely as well. If content creators don't need an advertising agency, then clients are just able to use these third parties that are representing the content creators. Then what's the point of having an advertising agency other than specific branded content, which why not do internally with whatever? I see the marriage that is needed between both agency and content creators. So there's definitely value in both. And I would like to see either go away for sure.
Rock meet hard place. It's an interesting time to be in the agency life for sure, and just social in general. But yeah, it's exciting.
Chit Chat.
Well, we probably should hit the 10 questions.
It's time for
10 questions. Is that a yes or no, or what do you think?
10 questions.
Let's do it. What's the most underrated social media platform right now?
I don't know how much I would put it in the camp of social, but Pinterest, funny enough. I don't know if that's just me becoming a homeowner recently. The ability to not only find inspiration there and share some of the things you're working on, I think people forget that it's a much more streamlined way to find almost exactly what you think you're looking for to help kind of guide that next step sometimes. I could get yelled at in the comments or something that's not really a social platform, but I would say that one doesn't really get talked about quite as much in the conversation. Vastly different one that we don't, again, activate on organically, but there is a paid presence there. But I just think it's a great app.
It's funny. I was just thinking, like, it would be so cool is if you guys had different car cams and just streamed like 24/7, one vehicle on one adventure that was constantly going, and it was live streaming 24/7 on Twitch, and like people could come in and watch this vehicle go on this adventure constantly all over these places and never ending, and then have different guests and things like that. Like that would be, anyways, ideation is a whole other.
Twitch and Discord, like those are, I don't think they can be understated how massive they're becoming and how vital they are to certain things. But yeah, no, it's a good answer.
What's the biggest mistake brands make on social media?
Biggest mistake, I mean, aside from, major errors and flubs, right, of really saying the wrong thing, I would say it's not being comfortable enough to really approach social media users in the right way on social media, right? It's not just one size fits all, plaster the same thing all over and use the same language, the flowery language that maybe you used on, your website or anything like that. You have to sort of be willing to kind of take the mask off a little bit as a brand, right? That doesn't mean you have to abandon your brand guidelines and who you are and your ethos. But I do think that you have to be willing to kind of meet people, like I said, where they are. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but that really is, I think that can be the biggest downfall for a brand, is if you're not willing to really relate to people, talk to them how they, speak there, show them, the things in a way that they're used to there. That can be really a downfall and a detriment to brands for sure. And it's a hard thing to overcome. And again, I have to commend Toyota for letting us join TikTok and do this and really take swings creatively, as well as in the way that we, write copy and things like that. So that would be my biggest, is not being willing to really jump full in.
I know we touched on this a little bit, but Instagram or TikTok, where's the future headed in terms of like, kind of things kind of peak out and trends change and things kind of evolve? What do you think?
I don't want to say TikTok's like a bright star, right? Like, are they going to burn out faster? Because Instagram's been around for so long, right? And there is that backing behind Meta. There is that large corporate sort of backing and that long-term planning that are coming from Meta as well. I think TikTok is going to be my answer. I think you can see it in the way that the social media news progresses month in and month out and year in and year out. Everyone is trying to play catch up to what they're doing. Like I said, hopefully they're not just a big star that burns out bright, and we'll see, of course, what happens with here in the United States and the ban. But I would say, yeah, they seem to be more on the forefront of where people want to be and new things that people want to do.
What is the weirdest brand trend you've seen blow up online?
I won't say weirdest. I think one of my favorite has been Target. Whoever runs their social, they on TikTok started really poking fun at like music licensing, right? And it was because, there's always trending sounds, right? And brands can't always get away with that. It's very expensive to do that. As an individual user or creator, you can get away with that, but brands, we often can't. We have music libraries, the stock music libraries that we have to use, things like that. Right. And so I just personally really loved when Target for a while was really poking fun at, like, they'd try to jump on the trend. Like there was the paddling the boat across the water and there was a certain song that was with that, but they put their own, stock music track on it. And they're like, this is what we have to deal with. Like, we can't do what you guys do. And so our job is hard trying to join into these conversations.
If you could delete one social media feature forever, what would it be?
I honestly want to say going live, just because I get notified of all these brand pages or like, creator pages I follow that just automatically tell me that they're going live. And I'm like, that just could be me. It just could be me. I don't watch the lives very often. I just find it funny now that it's just become something that's always notified. Or the channels too on Instagram. They're always like, they started a channel, they want you to join. And I'm like, I had
channels groups.
What about you?
I mean, there's some comments that can go. The spokesperson for AT&T, she had a big issue with sexual harassment and on her social media. To the point where she shut it all down and she changed the way that she dressed in the AT&T commercials to avoid any attention being brought to that. And I thought, this is literally the worst effect social media can have on somebody's life. They literally have to alter their appearance, and God knows what that does to them mentally.
Absolutely.
And it's, to me, comments can be some of the worst.
I agree with you. Very few times are the comments a helpful discourse or, pointing something out that maybe, might benefit or add something to the conversation. And I fully agree with you. Yeah, I think there are a few brands I see like that that do that on their social. I think Apple is one of them that really has, I think, turned off comments, on everything they put on YouTube, right? That there's a lot of that. But yes, no, I fully agree. I think comments can be, while there's a lot of engagement there, I don't think it can be worth it that often.
What's your superpower when it comes to managing social media crises?
Thankfully, I haven't been a part of too many. I think there's a decisiveness to me that can be, whether or not it's good or bad. I think it has been good in the instances that I have experienced. Sometimes that can definitely be the opposite bad side of that coin, is a brand going out with maybe a statement too fast, right? And they haven't really thought through what the repercussions are, what they're saying. That's not really what we deal with per se. But if something has gone wrong or on social, right, I think there's a decisiveness about how do you address it, how do you pivot it. There was an instance of some creative from a couple of years ago that a certain community did not love because the props used weren't super accurate. And so one of the things we did was, we decided we needed to not only keep the content up, and that's not to say that this was my decision alone, this was our client's decision, was keep the content up and then work very quickly with our team and the community management team at Toyota to start crafting responses, right? Of, how do we kind of buffer this? How do we address this? How do we kind of take the air out of the room, poke fun at ourselves, while also simultaneously we decided very quickly to do essentially a reshoot of the content and put it out pretty rapidly a few days later to kind of regain that trust. Again, leaning into with all the copy we wrote and coordinating with community management, we're poking fun at ourselves. We figured, this isn't a crisis in the truest sense. It did get a lot of negative attention. And so how do we sort of remedy this in a way that's not just going to push everything under the rug and move on? How do we become part of the conversation, admit that we're learning to do better, right? And have a little bit of fun about the situation. And it actually went over very well. And so again, I that's not something that I decided, but it was one of the decisions in the room on how do we address this? What's the next step we take? Where can we shoot this? I shot it, right? How do we kind of get this out the door as quick as possible? And it's a testament to, the great clients that were there, the great team that was there. But I do think that, in a crisis, sometimes there has to be a quick decision on what is the blowback on this and what's the proper response, rather than sitting and toiling and waiting and just letting it get worse.
What's your favorite type of content to create or curate?
I'm simple, and that's my favorite is just photography. I love photography so much.
You are good at it. You are good at it. Has there ever been a campaign idea that seemed crazy but worked out brilliantly?
The GR Corolla, it's not really a formal campaign per se, right? There wasn't a top-down decision by Saatchi&Saatchi to sort of invest in this full campaign at this time, but for the GR Corolla, before the GR Corolla came out or was even known to anyone, Toyota TMC, our parent company in Japan, they released the GR Yaris at the Tokyo Motor Show. I think that was 2020 maybe, or 2021. I think it's 2020. Massive blowback on socials, right? Twitter, Instagram, Jalopnik, Motor Trend, everybody's like writing like, why do they get the GR Yaris in Japan and it's not coming to the States, right? Everyone was very bummed. 3-cylinder, hot hatch, manual. Everybody loved that thing. One of the things that happened was our team was brought into a conversation with some incredible, smart folks at Toyota, Zach Reed being one. And they let us know, well, okay, you're under NDA, right? This is confidential, but Toyota or the North America will be getting something in that fashion. And it'll be, under a different name, under a different vehicle, but a very similar build under the hood. And so they said, how can we stir up a little bit of trouble on this, right? A little bit of conversation. We identified there was a Jalopnik tweet and they said, America's not getting this. And so we identified them because, Jalopnik's always great at poking fun at brands, right? At automakers. And they always have great writers. And so we thought, okay, well, let's quote tweet this. And we said, what do you guys think? Does North America need a hot hatch? With like the, wide eyes emoji. And it was the tweet heard around the world. I mean, the engagement was off the charts. People were freaking out. And so from there, a month or, I can't remember how much longer later, they came back to us and said, well, how do we build on this, right? We kind of stirred the pot, drum up a little bit of interest, but be very, very, very quiet about it, right? We need a sort of crescendo in this story because there's a long timeline. At the time, there was like a year until this thing was coming out. So we started proposing, we photoshopped Gazoo Racing logos into the background of existing Corolla hatchback images. We would Photoshop the camo wrapped GR Corolla into the background of, again, existing Corolla hatchback images. So it got a little bit more and more overt, and we were doing like G16 on the dash and, all these things that would kind of allude to what was coming, what was under the hood. And for those that know, they know. And so it was like GR4 on a pallet, stuff like that. That to me was one of my favorite things we've ever done. And so it slowly crescendoed. And then eventually we got close to the reveal and we ended up putting together a full shoot, a detective kind of losing his mind, right? He's been following our clues, trying to piece it together. It's right under his nose. And so we put that together. We scripted that out, worked with an incredible company, Anthemic, to put that together. And then that went out right before the reveal. So that to me was a really long tail on that. It was a fun one.
What's the first thing you check on your phone in the morning, email or social?
Social.
What's the order in which you check things?
Instagram's usually first, just because a community, TikTok, I feel like I'm just there to watch sometimes, right? I don't post much. I don't really share a ton of my friends on TikTok. So Instagram is usually my main mode of communication. But TikTok, yeah, I'll jump in there for a couple minutes in the morning. But TikTok actually might come after Outlook. I think I go Instagram, Outlook, see if any important, urgent emails will come through, and then I'll make time for TikTok.
If you weren't in social media, what career would you be in?
I'd like to tell myself I would have gotten involved in photography sooner. I'd love to do that full time, but,
You get to do that with your job, right, though, don't you?
Yeah, I get to do it all the time, but, I think having more time to do it in the way that I want to do it, right, and kind of perfecting the craft and kind of branching out and doing my own stuff, I that's not to say I don't love that I get to do it as well as part of my job, but yeah, if I could focus more on it, I would love to. Different types of photography as well, shoot a lot of cars now. I don't shoot a ton else anymore.
Of all the things you've ever done, what's your favorite?
Not to be repetitive, but that GR Corolla campaign might be one of them. Like I said, my memoir would be called Falling Up a Hill. It was out of necessity, but I'm really proud of the Tacoma images that I was able to capture for, similar to the GR Corolla campaign. That kind of kicked off a whole wave of everyone wanting to tease their vehicles before the reveals. And so leading into, before the Tacoma reveal, I was extremely lucky enough to attend a shoot, with an incredible photographer, Anton Watts, and this team that was really just leading, they were doing the shoot. I was just some guy that was there. But out of necessity, that team also wanted specific images as teasers, right? And so whether that's the now new JBL speaker that was included, right? They wanted the iForce Max badge on the back, kind of kicking up dirt. And so Anton's focused on getting that hero shot, and we only have kind of a certain moment to get it. And rather than us inundating him with it, I was the right place, right time kind of person that they asked to do it. But I am proud with how those photos came out. There was a whole litany of them that were taken. Just that whole experience was incredible. It was one of my first times, on one of those larger sets that the team was putting together, and that whole art department team and all of that was just eye-opening, and they were super gracious and so talented. And yeah, getting to spend 10 days in Utah with them, who can complain?
10 questions.
10 questions!
Is there anything you wish you had told your younger self before you got into this?
Oh, man.
Or I guess any advice you'd give your younger self?
I would say start trying to put steps in place for work-life balance. That's not something that I'm known for. It's not my strong suit, I don't think.
Right.
Because I do love my work, right? And I love the travel I get to do with it. I just enjoy it. Make sure that you understand that work isn't going to love you back, right? There is a part to you. There is a large part to you in your life that isn't inside of work. So it's important to stay, hungry when you're young and you have the energy to do it. And if you love it, that's great. Always remember that there is important stuff outside of it.
Any advice you have for somebody trying to get into doing this type of work?
Always say yes to just the opportunities in front of you, right? I think that's not really specific to this field, I don't think. I think that can apply to any young person trying to get involved in any field or be around the people that are doing what they want to do. Just say yes. They're going to ask you to do something small, or they're going to ask you to, one of my fondest memories at FH was incredible team was doing a Longhorn Steakhouse live stream cooking, crazy thing that was at the time very innovative. And they just needed bodies in the room to help, fill out the space so they could understand the camera work and everything that was going to be involved in it and the flow of the whole thing. And I was like, intern, I was like, yeah, I'll be a body in the room. And that was it. And then, we got to, you chat and you kind of kick around ideas. And, it's great when you work with gracious people that are open to some dumb interns' ideas. But, those things stand out to people, right? And those are the building blocks that lead to you getting a job offer and sticking around. So that's, I think, I think being able to show or quantify what you've done is important too. Right. I think that I initially learned that and was told that with something like a resume, right? Don't just say you did social media work. What was the impact? What did you do? Did you change something in the organization? Did you see success or not? Things like that, or even just what the final product looked like, right? If you are doing your own photography, start to show it off and show that progress that you've made. I think those things are all, don't be afraid to share what you're doing. I would say lastly, just a bit of emotional intelligence and awareness of sort of always where you are, right? There's always going to be some sort of hierarchy.
Right.
Not to say that, right, my team doesn't really, we have one, right? I have a boss and I manage people on my team, but it's a democracy of ideas. But understand how you're presenting them, how you come off, understand, how you're being perceived and presenting the ideas that you have. Those will all just, I think, set you up for success anywhere. And that's why, if social goes away for whatever reason, if we just decide to ban social media forever, I won't be without. I think there's a lot that I've learned and skills that I can bring to anything else. And so I think if you kind of focus on those, it should be good, hopefully, wherever you want to go.
That's cool, man. Where can people find you?
Oh, they can find me on Instagram, Vander Forest and the number 4 at the end. That's my personal Instagram. That's the one. I have a TikTok, but I don't use it personally.
Right. Okay. Your website?
I do. It's not currently active. Since we were buying the house, I was like, maybe I don't. And I like my job. I was like, I don't need to pay for my portfolio right now.
Right.
But you can find me on LinkedIn, Sam Vander Forest. Cool. Happy to connect with anybody.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure to get all this information out of you and a better understanding about Toyota and social media work for you. And again, thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me on, Sean. It's great to connect with you and great questions. I appreciate you giving me the time. This has been a blast, man.
Absolutely. And that's a wrap.
Just fix it in post.